and that cash on. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Simon Evans, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. I hope that you had a happy St. Valentine's Day. In William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, the young, love-besotted maiden cries out, "My bounty is as boundless as the sea, my love as deep. The more I give to thee, the more I have, for both are infinite." We'll be musing on the romantic verse of Shakespeare, Lord Byron, John Keats and others later in the programme. But for now, it's a joy to greet you, dear viewers, on this mid-February morning as you join me to discuss arts, culture, politics and current affairs. President Donald Trump has begun a negotiation with Vladimir Putin to end Russia's war on Ukraine. It's not very clear that either Ukraine or Europe will be involved. How has Europe become so ineffectual that once again a country in our continent is overwhelmed by a malevolent dictator, and once again we acquiesce in its dismemberment? My panel will give its view. Thousands of pro-Palestine protesters took to the streets of London yesterday, marching from Whitehall to the United States Embassy in protest against President Donald Trump's plans for Gaza. What are the realistic options for the region following the October 7th attack and the Israeli attempt to eliminate Hamas? Retired British Army officer and Middle East advisor to the Ministry of Defence, Sir Simon Mail, will join me. And the 78th British Academy Film Awards, more commonly known as the BAFTAs, will take place this evening at London's Royal Festival Hall. I'll be joined by showbiz journalist Lee Purvis to discuss who is in line to receive a gong. But first, your news headlines with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Michael. A very good morning. It's just gone 11 o'clock. Here are your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. Now we start with some breaking news. The Austrian police believe the Villach stabbing was part of an Islamist attack. A 23-year-old Syrian asylum seeker has been arrested after stabbing passerbys in the Austrian city yesterday. A 14-year-old boy has died and 4 others were left injured. The 23-year-old suspect, who has not yet been named, is a Syrian national with legal residence in Austria, according to the police. Austria's right-leaning Freedom Party leader, Herbert Kickl, said in a statement, "We need a rigorous crackdown on asylum and cannot continue to import conditions like those in Villach." And the Prime Minister is to join European leaders at an emergency summit on Monday as they consider how to respond to the US President Donald Trump's push for an end to the war in Ukraine. Sir Keir Starmer is to visit Washington later in February in hopes it will bridge the gap between Europe and the US. This comes after the transatlantic relationship was strained by Mr. Trump's decision to speak to Vladimir Putin in the search for a Ukraine peace deal. Meanwhile, there are reports of the PM preparing to overrule Chancellor Rachel Reeves and raise British defence spending. Speaking last night, the Prime Minister said it was a once-in-a-generation moment for the UK, the US and Europe to work together, and that it's clear Europe must take on a greater role in NATO. This comes as the Munich Security Conference draws to a close later today, after a weekend of discussing future security challenges. During the conference, Volodymyr Zelensky called for the creation of a European army, after suggesting the continent could not rely on Donald Trump's United States for its defence.
Many leaders have talked about Europe that needs its own military, an army of Europe. And I really believe that time has come. The armed forces of Europe must be created.
Meanwhile, senior officials from Donald Trump's administration will start peace talks with Russian and Ukrainian negotiators in Saudi Arabia in the coming days. The family of British nationals Craig and Lindsay Foreman is rallying to secure their safe return after the couple was detained in Iran. The couple were travelling across the world on motorbikes before being arrested in January, with Iranian state media reporting they face security charges. The Foreign Office is in contact with Iranian officials and providing consular support. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's Chagos Islands deal has been hit by another dramatic revelation as the chief mastermind behind the deal and the former Mauritian Prime Minister has been questioned over an alleged money laundering scandal. The Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, is urging the Prime Minister to abandon the deal, citing concerns about corruption. Speaking to GB News earlier on, Secretary of State for Ministry and Trade, Jonathan Reynolds, said we need to focus on the deal itself.
Negotiation around with the Chagos Islands is about securing the long-term future of an incredibly important UK-US military base. That's what the deal is seeking to achieve. It's why the previous government began negotiations around it. And what matters to me is making sure for our national security that long-term position is upheld. And, there's been a lot of commentary on what that deal is. When it's finished, it'll be published in the usual way. But let's not lose sight of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to secure the long-term future of an essential facility.
And the government has announced a new multi-billion-pound investment in the steel industry. A consultation was launched aimed at looking at long-term issues facing the sector, such as high electricity costs, unfair trading practices and scrap metal recycling. It's believed the threat of Donald Trump's tariffs and increases to energy costs has spurred the £2.5 billion plan. And Hollywood descends onto London this afternoon for the 78th BAFTA Awards. There are 42 films up for awards this evening as the slightly unpredictable award season kicks off, with the drama Conclave leading the way with 12 nominations. Shining a light on the selection process of a new pope, the film's lead, Ralph Fiennes, is up for Best Actor. Spanish-language musical Emilia Perez is up there with 11 nominations, but its chance at success took a hit recently after an offensive historic tweets resurfaced from its stars. The ceremony will be hosted by actor David Tennant at London Royal Film Hall. That's the news on GB News. I'll be back in half an hour, but now it's back to Michael.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Sophia Hill. President Trump has confronted Europe with some stark realities. Unless he relents, the war against Ukraine will be ended without European input and maybe without Ukrainian consent. Europe has been told to police the settlement and to look after its own security. The Russian aggressor will be rewarded. and neither Europe nor Ukraine seems likely to enjoy an American defence guarantee. Decades of warnings to European governments to shoulder their defence responsibilities have been ignored, and here is the outcome. Even now, it's not at all clear that the major European powers will divert money from other programmes to defence, and they are essentially defenceless. Joining me now is my panel, Opinions and Features Editor at City, Alice Denby, Mail Online journalist Lettice Bromowski, and former Labour advisor Matthew Lazar. Lettice, I set it out pretty starkly there.
Yeah.
What is your reaction? I mean, it's my feeling that this weekend we're seeing, huge geopolitical changes.
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely a sort of generational shift and a monumental moment. I wish I could say that we were massively surprised, though, but this is Trump's sort of MO in this, He's a utilitarian to the core. He is based on America first, always, and that's what he's looking at getting out of this deal with Trump, or potentially ending a sort of forced peace talks with Putin, when he's come into power right now, he's got his biggest political capital. He's at the start of his first 5 years, and he's looking to prove to people what he said he would do when he came in, which is end these wars, end the war in Gaza, end the war in Ukraine. He's really looking at short-term outcomes here, and I think that that's what we're going to be seeing going forward with this potential forced peace deal.
Alice, an irony, a paradox as far as I'm concerned. Donald Trump is putting America first, but apparently happy to see Russia, the historic enemy, triumph in Europe. I mean, triumph in the short term by getting, a good result for Putin in Ukraine. But, if Europe is to be defenceless, there's been quite a lot of talk this morning about what Russia's next move might be. Is this really in the interest of the United States?
I don't think it's in the United States' interest at all to be negotiating with a bully and an authoritarian like Vladimir Putin. I think it's a very worrying moment for Europe. As you say, it feels like we've been left defenceless on our own. America clearly no longer going to stand up for Europe and for the shared values, essentially, the settlement that we had, the whole notion of the West, it appears to be fracturing at the moment. I think if there's one positive outcome that might come out of this, I think you alluded to it at the top, is that Europe does wake up. I think we've been complacent. I think we need to increase defence spending across the board. And this may be the moment that we do start taking responsibility for our own defence again.
Matthew, how realistic is that latter point? I mean, we do already spend 2% of GDP in the United Kingdom on defence, which is quite a large sum of money, and yet apparently we cannot deploy submarines, we cannot deploy ships, aircraft carriers. We've got an army of 70,000, and it's thought that we might be able to deploy a brigade, which is quite a small number of soldiers. So, the idea, even if we go to 2.65, any number you choose, we're spending our money this ineffectively. I mean, we can't even put peacekeeping troops into Ukraine, let alone defend ourselves if Russia came for us.
Yes, I mean, I don't think Russia's got the capability to come for us either. Let us not... I think one of the things is that Trump is doing, he's rather an 80s character. He's kind of stuck in his heyday. And I think he thinks, he's thinking he wants to have a nice summit, a la, the summits of the 1980s, which eventually helped bring about the end of the Cold War. And he thinks that, and he's thinking, that Russia is still the power that it was. What, of course, he is doing is ignoring the other real world power, which is China. And so what we've interestingly said this week is we've had China saying that Europe must be involved in any peace talks. He's pushing Europe into the arms of China, which is not in the long-term interest of America. You're absolutely right. Of course, whether Spain spends 1.4 or 2%, or we spend 3% and not 2% of our GDP on defence, the whole of the, as you're saying, the whole of the post-war settlement was based around the fact that we operated together. Yes, we need to do more in Europe. A number of countries have started to do it. Some countries spend more than 3%. But, little Estonia on its own is never going to hold back the Russian might. And if Trump wants to go down this absolutely insane path, then he is going to change the world, and it's not going to be to the benefit of America, because it's not 1945, and America does not have all its own way.
There is one thing...
We do need to blame ourselves, don't we?
Yeah.
The United Kingdom and other Europeans. Matthew's right that the deal was that we did things together, but we, the Europeans, have reneged on that deal. We've not done nearly sufficient. The United States is a serious military force, we know that, Europe, which is a comparable size economy, is not in any way a serious military force. We have brought this upon ourselves.
I do agree with that to some extent, and I do understand the frustrations that Trump is saying that, you know, we've been putting our part into this to fund the Ukraine war and protect it, and Europe hasn't been doing enough. Our defence spending right now is 2.3%, and there's only 3 countries in the Allies right now who are meeting their GDP per capita defence spending, which is us, the UK, the US, and Greece, surprisingly. Italy's not making it, Germany's not making it. They're actually saving around £25 billion by not technically making their spending that they need to make. So you can see how that would become frustrating in the longer term. But actually, we've also got the other point here in the UK of where's this money going to come from? If we raise it to what Keir Starmer's saying today, which is to 2.65%, that's an extra £10 billion of spending we're going to have to find, whether that's spending cuts, tax rises. You know, the OBR has just halved Rachel Reeves's growth forecast. So where's it going to go? She's got no wiggle room here. And as the spring budget approaches, I fear that, I'm not quite sure, likely taxes are going to be going up again.
Greece, by the way, and Turkey, another NATO member, are always very well armed in case they go to war with each other. Alice, let's answer that question. Where's the 10 billion going to come from? First of all, do we think that Sir Keir Starmer is overruling the Chancellor? Do we think that Sir Keir Starmer is going to go for something like an extra 10 billion annually?
I think it looks that way. I do think this speaks to certain domestic strifes that the Chancellor seems to be facing herself. You know, we've had some slightly embarrassing revelations about her expenses in a previous job, some fudging of her CV on LinkedIn. So I think she's in trouble. And as Letty said, her wiggle room, her fiscal headroom has been completely knocked out. So she's in a really difficult position, I think. And it does sound like in a battle between her and the Foreign Secretary, David Lammy. David Lammy has been victorious. She's in a corner. The one thing I would say about America and about Europe, we have been too complacent. Our politicians have been failed to be honest with us about the trade-offs involved, and in that respect, reneging on their fundamental duty of any government, which is to keep their people safe. But I would say that there have been moments when other countries have stood by America. I think it's right to say the only time Article 5 of NATO has ever been invoked is after 9/11. So we have stood by America in their time of need. And I think it's...
And in Iraq. I mean, you know, let's remember, of course, let us not, Trump may feel that he's personally invincible and that America's invincible. Well, tell that to the Taliban, who beat the West. Tell that in Iraq, where a messy compromise had to go and where British troops paid with their lives. So, I mean, I think for British politics, the big question is, who's going to stand up for Britain? You know, I think, as we've seen in Canada, which is over tariffs, I think you could see a big anti-Trump, anti-American backlash of people who think that that he's serving his own interest and we just serve ours. And those politicians, and you know who I'm thinking of, who like to have their picture taken with Mr. Trump, may find they don't look as patriotic in a few weeks' time as they think they have done in the past.
And Matthew, just from you, the briefest word about whether the Prime Minister is overruling the Chancellor on 10 billion of extra defence spending.
I think he probably is, and I think she's going to have to find the money somehow, but that means that he's going to have to tell my comrades in the Labour Party they're not going to have all the nice things they want, like new schools and new hospitals. So as a country, we're going to have to face tough choices.
Or, of course, higher taxes as well. Thank you very much, my panel. Alice Denby, Letty Bromowski and Matthew Lazar. The panel will return to discuss whether Vice President J.D. Vance spoke the truth about Europe's failure to control migration and to protect freedom of speech. It's time now for the Great British Giveaway. If you want to be one of the 2 new winners, each with a new iPhone, shopping vouchers and £10,000 in free cash, here are the details that you'll need.
We're doubling your chances to win in our latest Great British Giveaway, with 2 fabulous prize bundles up for grabs. There's 2 lots of a totally tax-free £10,000 in cash. You'll also receive a brand new iPhone 16, along with £500 in shopping vouchers to spend at your favourite store. And the best news is 2 lucky winners are going to win. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. 1 entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Coming up, as the drizzle of October the 7th hostages back to freedom continues, what are the options for Gaza? Retired British Army officer General Sir Simon Mail will join me to discuss President Trump's plans for that territory following pro-Palestine protests in London yesterday. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get the book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point.
Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Thousands of pro-Palestine protesters took to the streets of London yesterday, marching from Whitehall to the United States Embassy in protest against President Donald Trump's idea of turning Gaza into the Riviera of the Middle East. Following the Israeli onslaught after the October the 7th, 23 massacres, Hezbollah and Iran are weakened, and in Syria, Bashar al-Assad is gone. Hamas has been decapitated but not destroyed. The two-state solution looks dead, but who other than Hamas can govern Gaza? Joining me now is retired British Army officer and the Middle East advisor at the Ministry of Defence, General Sir Simon Mail. Welcome back, Simon.
Thanks, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Now, Donald Trump's proposals have been dismissed in Europe and in many places. I suppose one thing that he might have been saying was there can be no solution to Gaza unless Gaza is a place where there is investment and there are jobs and there's an international outlook and there's something for things to be radicalised. Was there anything in the president's idea?
Yes, there is, undoubtedly. We've had 30 years of sort of virtue signalling in many ways about two-state solution. And like a number of other assumptions, it's been rather upset. A lot of people have done talking. There was a time, I believe, back in 79 or 93, the Oslo Accords, where a two-state solution was very much on the cards. Demographics have gone against it. I think the 7th of October attacks, the barbaric 7th of October attacks, in some ways kill the two-state solution, particularly since, as you said in your introduction, Michael, the whole region has changed. Hezbollah emasculated, Syria now dominated by probably a Turkish-backed militias at the moment. We'll see how that works out. And Iran very, very, very firmly weakened and on the back foot. And I find it difficult to see how Israel would even agree now to a state next door to it that continued to have the poison of Hamas running through it. And this is where people are, either clever or disingenuous when they try and conflate Hamas as a militant terrorist organisation determined to extinguish Israel and, of course, the very human plight of the Palestinian people.
OK, so no two-state solution. I think one body and one person after another is going to have to come to terms with that. But then, even if Donald Trump is right to say that we need an economy that works in Gaza, it is presumably not realistic to deport 2 million people and hand it over to the United States to make it into a era.
I think the old David Petraeus cry when we were all in Iraq, tell me how this ends. We are where we are at the moment. There are some shattered assumptions now, I think, about the Middle East. There's a reordering in the old global network, as you were talking about with your previous guests. But all roads, to an extent, do lead to Gaza at the moment and some sort of solution there. But as Andrew Roberts has written many times, and you'll know him, there is something about the Palestinian issue that has suited people to lock it into aspic. After the Second World War, millions of Russians, Germans, Ukrainians, Romanians, Hungarians, you name it, were displaced and moved all over Africa, all over the Middle East. But for some reason, no, for many reasons, we understand, so many Jews were displaced and moved. For some reason, it has suited a lot of people in the Middle East, and dare I say, the militant tendency within the Palestinian cause to lock that single problem in aspic. To no advantage of the Palestinian people. And if you can imagine how much money has gone into Gaza, which was just siphoned off by Hamas in order to allow them to continue their attacks on Israel, all that mass of money that went into building those networks, which one could argue could have been pushed into producing a much better solution for the people of Gaza. But it's difficult to see how they stay in Gaza given the destruction there. And in some ways you would say, well, you have to move out in order that we can rebuild. But I totally accept at the moment people are trying to contemplate what that would actually mean in the long term. And it's very interesting, of course, the Jordanians have made absolutely clear they don't want Palestinians. They certainly want anything to do with Hamas. And the Egyptians the same.
Well, I was going to mention Egypt because rather lazily, some people think that Gaza is surrounded by Israel. It is not, because Gaza has a border with Egypt, and that border is very strictly controlled and patrolled because the Egyptians do not want to take the Palestinians. They don't want people filtering from Gaza into their own country because they think it will bring them chaos, disorder and terror.
Well, they have a certain amount of right to believe that, given that Sadat was, of course, murdered by a member of the Muslim Brotherhood for his peace deal with Israel, which did give an opportunity at that stage, potentially, for a better outcome for the Palestinians. Now, we're talking 40 years ago now.
What alternative to Hamas running Gaza? Is there an alternative?
Well, they talk about the Palestinian Authority. But again,
let's just remind viewers where the Palestinian Authority is in power today.
West Bank, of course.
Used to run Gaza.
Used to run both. It used to speak on behalf of all the Palestinian people. Of course, then they split between Fatah and Hamas. And, of course, that was sorted out by quite a bloody coup by Hamas in the Gaza Strip. So there's no love lost there. It's interesting that Trump is going to Saudi Arabia because the Gulf states with their money have a role to play here, undoubtedly, in the reconstruction and maybe the leadership of a Muslim Arab force. The ideal people would be, of course, Palestinians, but not Hamas. And I think once the leverage that Hamas have over Israel with the hostages goes, I really find, as I've said from the beginning, that anyone associated with the 7th of October planning or execution of those atrocities is a dead man walking.
Yeah.
I'm afraid, just watch the film Munich. And so we just need to see. Hamas, I'm sure, still have an awful lot of support around the world because it suits people to support them. They've got support because people don't understand the difference or the responsibility Hamas have for what's happened in Gaza at the moment. But at the end of the day, I don't think Israel or any of the Gulf states or Egypt wish to see Hamas remotely involved, if they can help it, with a solution for Gaza.
I mean, you do raise this very important question about what the Muslim states, with money and power and relationship with the United States and to some extent relationship with Israel, what they might be expected to do. I'm talking in particular about Saudi Arabia and Egypt, but UAE and Qatar come into this as well.
Yes, indeed. And of course, there's a big division between Qatar, UAE and Saudi Arabia over their relationship with the Muslim Brotherhood in a whole, and of course Hamas is an offshoot of that. But I think it is part of, again, this is that old cry, if you want to understand the problem, get a bigger map. There's no doubt about it. This is linked to what's going on in Ukraine and Russia. This is linked to what's going on in, with the relationship with China. It is linked to Iran. And of course, many people believe that Hamas launched the attacks on the 7th of October precisely to stop a rapprochement, perhaps, between Saudi Arabia and Israel. It'll be very difficult now because the emotions running about the Palestinians. As I say, I draw a very sharp distinction between Hamas and the Palestinians in this case.
Yeah.
So it is interesting what will be on the agenda when Trump goes to Saudi Arabia, because it will not just be using Saudi Arabia as a base to talk about Ukraine, Russia, I'm sure.
Well, let's hope that the president steps up to the plate, because, as you say, you need to get a bigger map. It's a complicated problem. It needs a lot of thought. Thank you very much indeed, General Sir Simon Maile. Coming up, this week Italian police have launched a new series of raids to target mafia clans operating in and around the Sicilian capital, Palermo. I was joined by a man whose family was involved in the Cosa Nostra. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather forecast on the Met. The cloudy and cold theme is set to continue today. There'll be a little bit of patchy rain here and there, chiefly across Northern Ireland throughout the day, but some North Sea coast also seeing some outbreaks of rain. As that moves a bit further inland, we could just see a little bit of hill snow here and there. But for most of us, it is rather cloudy. Best of the sunshine once again will be up across the far northwest of Scotland. It may well just cheer up from time to time, also down towards Devon and Cornwall. But for most of us, temperatures struggling again, 4 to 6 degrees at best. Some milder air just down towards the far southwest. Here we could see highs reaching at 9 to 10 degrees. So as we see at Sunday afternoon, move into the evening again, the clearest of the skies will be up across parts of northwestern Scotland. Eastern Scotland seeing some outbreaks of rain continuing, but it's more especially across Northern Ireland where we'll potentially see some heavier rain from time to time. And then for most of England and Wales, it's generally dry, but rather cloudy. A little bit of mist and murk also across the hills. Into the evening hours, we'll see the cloud maybe break up across parts of northern England, maybe later on down towards the far southeast too. So where we do see the clearest of the skies, we will just see a touch of frost. But for most of us, I think most towns and cities staying just above freezing. Just need to keep an eye on the risk of some rain just beginning to move into western Scotland as we start Monday morning. As we move throughout the day, that may well just bump into the colder air, so we could just see some sleet and snow in places. So do keep an eye on the forecast if you have any travel plans across Scotland on Monday. But for most of us, it is a fairly grey picture once again, although exceptions down towards the southeastern corner, some sunshine here developing, and also maybe parts of Wales too. Temperatures for most, again, mid-single figures, potentially up to 10 down towards Devon and Cornwall.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, It happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30am.
Only on GB News.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
It's a good point. He's lying. Maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The mafia in Sicily was apparently set back in the early 1990s by an investigation that led to many of its leaders being imprisoned. The murder of Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino, the 2 judges who'd led the inquiries, led also to a popular revolt against the criminals' iron grip on society. Now, 1,200 police officers have launched a new series of raids to target mafia clans operating in and around the Sicilian capital, Palermo, resulting in at least 180 arrests. Their aim is to stop the mafia rebuilding its governing body, known as La Cupola. Joining me now is Riccardo Di Cascia. Riccardo, welcome.
Thank you, Michael.
Tell me a little bit about your background and how someone like you and your family might or might not be connected to the Cosa Nostra.
Well, my name is obviously Riccardo Di Cascia. I was born in Sicily, on the west coast of Sicily, a little town called Mazara del Vallo. I mean, growing up in Sicily, it's always challenging, especially as a Sicilian, having Sicilian parents, you know, and cousins and so on. You know, you get to know who the faces are, who they're not. But the good thing about it is I was born in a very devoted Roman Catholic family, honest family, and, you know, and it's...
Everyone has to make a choice.
Absolutely.
As to whether to get sucked into the Cosa Nostra or to remain aloof and make your living honestly. Is that true?
Absolutely. I mean, like you said, in anything, you have a choice. You either join the bad part of Sicily or the good part of Sicily. As you mentioned early on about, you know, we say there's a movement called No al Pizzo. And this
is refusing to pay protection money.
Correct.
If you're a shop or a business, refusing to pay protection money to the mafia.
Correct. And also we have, well, we did have some great heroes we looked up to, as you know, like Giovanni Falcone, who was from Palermo.
These 2 judges.
Yeah, and we had Paolo Borsellino, who was from Marsala. I'm from Mazara, and, you know, and for us, these are heroes. And they give us the strength to go forward, move forward.
When I was in Sicily, I got the idea that things were better than they had been. I mean, just to give a very small example, the Opera House was open because the Opera House used to be run by the mafia, and people had just refused to participate anymore. But it had been cleansed and it had reopened. Absolutely. People didn't seem to feel that all of society was run by gangsters. There was this resistance by young people refusing to pay the protection money to the mafia. But now I read about this big police operation. So have things slipped back? How good or bad are things?
Well, the mafia, like I said, is like, we call it in Sicily like come il cancro. It's like cancer. You know, you need to get it early. Once it spreads. I mean, the great thing that we have at the moment in politics is Giorgia Meloni. Fantastic. Great Prime Minister. Has done great work, as you probably know, lately. And hopefully she keeps on stamping the mafia out, because it needs to be stamped out. Because, I don't know if you know, Michael, I mean, the mafia started over 100 years ago, but it was the beginning of something. I mean, rich landowners employed strong men to look after the land. You know, that's how, you know, these strong look after the land there. But unfortunately, over the years, you know, they got involved, or they understood that these weak people need our help. So let's build something like a cupola, let's build something. you know, and then moved on to other unnecessary stuff, drugs and so on. But like I said, me growing up in Sicily, yes, we did see things happening, but
improving, you mean?
Improving, yes, improving. I mean, since the 90s, everything started to improve.
Is it partly the case that maybe the mafia is leaving the small business people relatively alone because it's gone into a much bigger business? It's gone into drugs.
Absolutely.
And that's a big international business. There's not much point taking a few euros off someone who runs a cafe if you can make billions out of drugs.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I believe the mafia has got a grip on gambling, online gambling, drugs, prostitutions. If there's a client, there's money to be made. That's what they say, you know.
And these are big businesses.
Big businesses. They don't bother now with the local vegetable man or stuff. They know he's only earning peanuts. You know, now it's just bigger business, more connected.
What's it like trying to operate in this society? I think I would find it so depressing to live in a society which was dominated by or heavily influenced by gangsterism.
Well, look, I go to Sicily 3-4 times a year. I love Sicily.
Yeah.
I love the weather. I love the food, as you know yourself. And I love trains. I like the old-fashioned train rides I take and so on. But you don't really, nowadays, you don't really see it because they hide. They hide. They don't want to be bothered and so on. But, I mean, the law, like I said, the law is getting more, shall we say, heavier towards them. They're scared. You know, like I said, you know, they're scared of the carabinieri. They're scared, so they kind of sort of keep in the shadows, if you know what I mean.
On the other hand, they're able to communicate more and more with each other, of course, using
technology,
using new technology, using encryption. I mean, even guys who are hidden away in mountains, even guys who are shut up in prison, continue to run operations using encrypted devices. Is that the picture? Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's the mafia is something that needs to be eradicated fast. The good thing about it, like I said earlier on, young people are starting to wake up. You know, they're not happy to close an eye.
Yes.
They're not happy, oh, I didn't see it, kind of thing, you know. Yeah, they're having a voice now. Also because, thank you to people who like to listen to these young people, like teachers and politicians, local politicians, and so on, and great judges.
Interesting to hear your praise for Giorgia Meloni. So she's taking the fight against the mafia seriously.
Correct.
This, of course, is very brave. We've given examples already of people who've been murdered for taking a stand against the mafia. So she really is, I mean, I guess she's putting her life on the line there.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen many prime ministers rule Italy. But Giorgia Meloni, for me, she is the real McCoy. She is the one who truly believes making Italy great. You know, I mean, Sicily, like I said, has so much to offer. You know, so much to offer. But again, it's suppressed. The actual island is suppressed by the wrong people.
Yeah. It really is. I mean, I don't think there are so many instances in life where there's just sort of good and evil, but I think in this case there is. There are two sides. There are good and evil.
I always say, everywhere you go, there's the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's it. Which place or where you're going to stand is your own personal point of view.
You have to make a choice. Thank you very much indeed, Riccardo.
Thank you, Mike.
Grazie.
Grazie
lei. Coming up tonight is the 78th BAFTA Awards. We'll receive a preview of the films that are set to sweep the gongs at the ceremony. But if you're in search of some winter sun, here is the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
You're looking happy.
Well, the forecast looks good.
So you've sorted the travel insurance then?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. We've got rain for Madeira over the next 24 hours, some stronger winds too, but much of the central Med will be dry with some sunny spells. We can see from Monday outbreaks of rain, strong winds, 17 Celsius in Madeira. The Canary Islands generally dry, and much of western and central parts of the Mediterranean seeing some spells of sunshine. Unsettled east towards Greece and across to Cyprus, thunderstorms, outbreaks of showery rain. The outlook though is for plenty of sunny spells, temperatures in the high teens to low 20s.
Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
It's the body image thing that concerns me. It's young girls watching Love Island and really skinny girls and young boys
hit the gym, but after this, yeah.
Exactly. I mean, they're seeing perfect bodies on the screen.
You don't need to go in the gym, Maymoon. You look gorgeous as you are, love.
I know. You see, the reason I don't enter anything like that, Kerry, is you know
you're gonna win.
Exactly. And it's not fair. It's not fair, I think, on everybody else being there.
It's not fair.
No.
But Kerry, what do you think about the body image thing? You know, when you talk about your daughter, is that something that you'd worry about, her comparing herself to the likes of what she sees on the screen?
Now, this is where there's a conflict of interest for me because I've been brought up in this industry since I was 17, so it's massively affected me. I mean, when you're put on the front cover of magazines after having a baby with a stretch mark in the circle of shame, you know, it does do a psychological effect on you. I think a lot of celebrities who have been around for so many years as I have been affected by that. But everyone has to bear in mind, I've had my children. I'm in my 40s. I feel I'm entitled to have my tweaks and try and improve on what I think are going down south and health and safety, tripping over any things that I don't want to be tripping over anymore. But I definitely do believe, I mean, majority of the young girls that go on Love Island, they all have the same big lips, the same big eyelashes, all the butt implants, and they're barely in their 20s. You know, it's if you go to the airport now, I remember going to the airport and I looked around and all the girls looked exactly the same.
GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/your say.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. The 78th British Academy of Film Awards, commonly known as the BAFTAs, will take place this evening at London's Royal Festival Hall. The films with the highest number of nominations include Conclave, Emilia Pérez, The Brutalist, and with the Oscars still to come in March, how will the awards pan out? Joining me now is the academic and showbiz journalist Lee Purvis. Lee, welcome. I'm going to ask you a provocative question to begin with. I mean, I understand what the Oscars are about, but why do we have British awards for global content? What's the point of that?
Because the BAFTAs are legendary in this industry. You know, they started in 1947. As you mentioned, it's 78 BAFTAs tonight. This is a real precursor as well for those nominees who, of course, will be up for an Academy Award. It's the creme de la creme. You can't get any higher as an accolade, certainly, as we know, as winning a BAFTA. And it's not just for
Oscar
actors.
is a higher accolade.
Arguable, debatable. The BAFTAs for me is far more classy. Having covered both awards as a reporter for many years, you know, you just got to look at the amazing goodie bags, the luxury goodie bags that the nominees get given, the BAFTAs for one. And, you know, as I said, it's a precursor to the Academy Awards, which take place this year on March the 2nd. And, you know, to win a BAFTA is the highest you could get. And it's not just for actors, it's for filmmakers, directors, producers. It was set up by a small group of 5 filmmakers in 1947 with the purpose to offer out international awards as well from the British boards. There are 5 boards involved with the BAFTA Academies, and take it from there.
OK, so it's about global content, but there's quite a strong British interest in Conclave.
That absolutely is. That's
Ralph Fiennes.
Right. So Ralph Fiennes won a BAFTA before for his role in Schindler's List. They were set to tip the board, actually sweep the board this evening with 12 nominations. However, things are slightly changing.
Right.
Obviously, he plays a cardinal who is investigating rather a lot of seedy activity.
Let's just have a look at it.
Yeah, it's long.
What happened? They say a heart attack.
You know how rumor spreads, and 1.25 billion souls watching.
Well done, no, Lawrence. It seems the responsibility for the conclave falls upon you.
Ralph Fiennes prominent in that clip. So it's changing. It was looking good for this film, but things are changing, you were saying?
Absolutely. So there's a lot of eyes on the Bruce list as well to see how that does this evening with Adrian Brody, who plays a Hungarian Holocaust survivor who then has to resettle in Pennsylvania. Really uncomfortable viewing. He's just such an incredible actor. But, you know, they're hot on the heels of Conclave, so time will tell who is going to actually win.
Let's have a little clip about that too.
It's yours, yes? Yes. All of them? Yes. Tell me, why is an accomplished foreign architect shoveling coal here in Philadelphia?
So, that one's coming up fast. Anora is an interesting film.
Yes, so Anora is so interesting. And, you know, they always say an underdog, let's watch and wait and see what happens. So with Anora, Mikey Madison, a 25-year-old American actress, plays the incredible role of Annie, who's a sex worker in New York and basically dates the son of a very rich Russian businessman. And it really takes you on a journey. Now, it's picked to be, I wouldn't necessarily describe it as a comedy, but there are elements of a dark rom-com about this, with echoes actually of Julia Roberts in the 90s film Pretty Woman. And this has won 2 awards very lately, actually very recently. And again, is set for an Oscar Academy Award. And I think tonight we might see this actually shine through and win one of the 7 nominations it's up for.
Here comes Anora, a little clip from that too.
If I get married to an American, I wouldn't have to go back to Russia.
Okay, so who should marry?
And do you, Anora, take this handsome gentleman?
So it's Mikey Madison who's particularly in the frame.
Mikey Madison, absolutely.
Mikey Madison, yeah.
All eyes on her.
Yeah.
She's also going to be very prevalent at a lot of the after parties this evening after the BAFTA Awards, and she's basically the talk of the town.
Right. Now, Emilia Perez. There are a number of issues around this movie. Do you want to take us through them? First of all, it's a Spanish film and it's in Spanish. Yeah.
It's also a musical.
Yeah.
Involving a lot of crime and talking a lot about drugs.
Yeah.
So it's really different. It's a Netflix project as well. Shrouded in controversy. So the lead actress, should we say, is the first trans actor to be actually nominated for an Oscar this year. However, shrouded in controversy due to some social media posts that were unveiled by a journalist about 3 weeks ago now.
From that person?
From this particular actress, yes.
I believe actor covers both sexes these days, or all sexes, probably.
Obviously down to individual preference as well. So Carla, Sophia Gascon basically had these text messages go out there, and as a result of them has actually missed a very high-profile Spanish award ceremony over the last couple of weeks, missed another big important award ceremony, and is obviously not due to attend tonight. However, her co-stars, Selena Gomez and Ariana Grande, are due to be there, and again, very prevalent on the after-scene party circuit, hosting at least one BAFTA Awards.
We can see a little clip from Emilia Perez as well.
Are you English?
No, I'm not English. Why?
No, because you you are pretty.
So, amongst other things, do the BAFTAs help to, as it were, clear the ground, make things more apparent as to what's going to happen at the Oscars later in the year?
Absolutely. So actually this coming Wednesday, we'll find out a little bit more on the back of the BAFTAs, which nominees who will be there tonight in London will be therefore nominated for the final Oscar Academy Awards. Of course, that takes place on March the 2nd. Everyone, we think, will be on their best behaviour tonight. There's a lot of eyes on security, actually, I have to add as well. Last year, David Tennant was hosting on stage and obviously was invaded by a YouTube influencer. And obviously lots of extra precautions are taken tonight. But I think we'll see all the stars and everyone very much on their best behaviour. All eyes are talking already about the outfits and the glamour and the gowns. And I think this year, actually, we'll see a more demure look than ever before. Lots of simplified, black, well-structured outfits.
Do the BAFTAs tend to take an independent line from the Oscars, or do they tend to be highly predictive of the Oscars?
The BAFTAs, and I will say this, having been affiliated with the BAFTAs for quite a few years, very independent of the Oscars. And actually, if anything, I would argue it's the other way around, so that the Oscars are very, and the boards there are very much persuaded by what we do here in Britain with the BAFTAs.
And how do you spend your BAFTA evening? You're going to be there, are you?
I am, actually. It's frantic. Within probably about the next 90 minutes, I will be getting ready to go on the red carpet. And, you know, you've got to be aware of the amount of work that goes into organising the BAFTAs as well. You know, for next year's 2026 BAFTAs, the work will be starting literally tomorrow morning. You've got to get that right shade of red, Michael, for the carpet. Right shade of red.
Thank you very much indeed, Lee Purvis. Have an absolutely splendid evening. That concludes the first hour of Sunday with Michael Portillo. But please rejoin me at noon, where my panel will discuss whether Vice President J.D. Vance's speech in Munich told Europe unwelcome truths about its failure to prevent mass migration and to defend free speech. Is the role of the artist now in peril, as exclusively AI art is auctioned in New York City? Plus, is Ireland's economy under threat? Its policy of attracting United States companies by charging a low rate of corporation tax brought it wealth, but has now earned the hostility of Donald Trump. And a new survey has found that nearly 8 in 10 Britons don't like love poetry by Shakespeare and Keats. We'll be discussing that. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News. Please rejoin me soon.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Today is going to be largely dry for most of us, often cloudy and still on the chilly side before turning milder by midweek. Having a look at the bigger picture then, we're still in this battleground, higher pressure out towards the east with this deep area of low pressure towards the west driving east and southeasterly winds. Across much of England and Wales today, it is going to be largely dry, cloudy, much drier than Saturday. Outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and breezy here too. Best of the sunshine across western Scotland, with eastern Scotland seeing some wintry showers. Otherwise, it is still on the chilly side, especially in the breeze, but highs in the southwest up to 8 or 9 degrees. So through Sunday evening then, we hold on to some wintry showers across eastern parts of Scotland, mainly falling as snow over the highest ground. Towards the west, we'll see some clear spells through this evening, but across Northern Ireland, turning damp with outbreaks of rain moving through. Across much of England and Wales, though, a largely dry end to the weekend with some clear spells developing into the night. So as we go Sunday night into Monday morning, this band of rain across Northern Ireland will continue to push its way north and eastwards into western parts of Scotland and the south, perhaps turning wintry over the hills. Otherwise, much of England and Wales staying dry with some clear spells, and under any clear spells, we could see just a touch of frost developing by Monday morning. So to start Monday morning, again, still a chilly start out there, a lot of cloud around. There will be some breaks in the cloud, especially across northern parts of Scotland, with a few showers across Orkney and Shetland. Some glimmers of sunshine coming into the southeast of England, with heavier spells of rain coming into Northern Ireland later in the day. Otherwise, temperatures ranging from 4 degrees in the east, but up to 8 in the far southwest. Bye-bye.
Even though we'll see a cloudy start, it'll be a bright outlook for the rest of the day. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
We're giving you not one, but 2 chances to win this month, with 2 prize bundles that include an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash. But that's not all. You'll also get a brand new iPhone 16 and a £500 shopping voucher to spend at your favourite store. So why not be extra lucky this month? For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. Call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB11 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 7th of March. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon and welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Poet John Donne once reflected, "I am 2 fools, I know, for loving and for saying so." We will ponder on the beauty of verse by cynic Mr. Donne and others later in the programme. For now, we have much else to discuss, including art, politics and current affairs. Vice President J.D. Vance did not court popularity amongst European leaders in a speech in Munich that said that migration and loss of free speech posed a bigger threat to them than Russia. Does he have a point? My panel will discuss. Last week, Christie's in New York announced that it would stage an auction dedicated solely to art created with artificial intelligence. Where does that leave the role of the artist? James Thomas from Martin Stanmore Auctioneers will be here to discuss. Is Ireland's economic golden age about to come to an end, with President Trump arriving at the White House for the second time? Telegraph journalist Michael Murphy will join me to discuss how US companies who flocked to Ireland and invested heavily in the country might have to change their policies. And as we reflect on St. Valentine's Day, a new survey has found that almost 8 in 10 of Gen Z Britons believe that the romantic poems of Shakespeare, Keats and Barrett Browning are outdated and irrelevant. But Professor Andrew Stauffer will join me in an attempt to convince young lovers otherwise. Before all of that, your latest news headlines with Sophia Hill.
Thank you, Michael. Very good afternoon. It's just gone 12 o'clock. Here are your latest headlines in the GB newsroom. Now, the Prime Minister is set to join European leaders at an emergency summit tomorrow as they consider how to respond to US President Donald Trump's push for an end to the war in Ukraine. Sir Keir Starmer is to visit Washington later in February in hopes it will bridge the gap between Europe and the US. This comes after the transatlantic relationship was strained by Mr. Trump's decision to speak to Vladimir Putin in the search for a Ukraine peace deal. Meanwhile, there are reports of the PM preparing to overrule Chancellor Rachel Reeves and raise British defence spending. Speaking last night, the Prime Minister said it was a once-in-a-generation moment for the UK, the US and Europe to work together, and that it's clear Europe must take on a greater role within NATO. This comes as the Munich Security Conference draws to a close later today after a weekend of discussing future security challenges. During the conference, Volodymyr Zelensky called for the creation of a European army after suggesting the continent could not rely on Donald Trump's United States for its defence.
Many leaders have talked about Europe that needs its own military, an army of Europe. And I really believe that time has come. The armed forces of Europe must be created.
While senior officials from Donald Trump's administration will start peace talks with Russian and Ukrainian negotiators in Saudi Arabia in the coming days. Now, just in the last half hour, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu are holding a press conference this morning in Jerusalem. Netanyahu says he's had a very productive discussion with Rubio and that President Trump is the greatest friend Israel has ever had in the White House. The Israeli leader also went on to say that he and Trump are working in full cooperation and coordination on Gaza. Now, Austrian police believe the suspect for the Villach stabbing was a suspected Islamist who was radicalised online. A 23-year-old Syrian asylum seeker has been arrested after stabbing passersby in the Austrian city yesterday. A 14-year-old boy has died and 4 others were left seriously injured, with 3 in intensive care. The 23-year-old suspect, who has not been named, is a Syrian national with legal residence in Austria, according to the police. Austria's right-leaning Freedom Party leader, Herbert Kickl, said in a statement, "We need a rigorous crackdown on asylum and cannot continue to import conditions like those in Villach." Meanwhile, Keir Starmer's Chagos Islands deal has been hit by another dramatic revelation, as the chief mastermind behind the deal and the former Mauritian Prime Minister has been questioned over an alleged money laundering scandal. The Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, is urging the Prime Minister to abandon the deal, citing concerns about corruption. Speaking to GB News earlier, Secretary of State for Ministry and Trade, Jonathan Reynolds, said we need to focus on the deal itself.
Negotiation with the Chagos Islands is about securing the long-term future of an incredibly important UK-US military base. That's what the deal is seeking to achieve. It's why the previous government began negotiations around it. And what matters to me is making sure for our national security that long-term position is upheld. And, there's been a lot of commentary on what that deal is. When it's finished, it'll be published in the usual way. But let's not lose sight of what we're trying to do here. We're trying to secure the long-term future of an essential facility.
And Hollywood descends onto London this afternoon for the 78th BAFTA Awards. There are 42 films up for awards this evening as the slightly unpredictable award season kicks off, with the drama Conclave leading the way with 12 nominations. Shining a light on the selection process of a new pope, the film's lead, Ralph Fiennes, is up for Best Actor. Spanish-language musical Emilia Perez is also up there with 11 nominations, But its chance at success took a hit recently after offensive historic tweets from its stars resurfaced. The ceremony will be hosted by actor David Tennant at London's Royal Festival Hall. Those are the latest headlines for now. More in half an hour.
Thank you, Sophia Hill. Quotes. No voter on this continent went to the ballot box to open the floodgates to millions of unvetted immigrants. But you know what they did vote for? In England, they voted for Brexit. And agree or disagree, they voted for it. And more all over Europe, they are voting for political leaders who promise to put an end to out-of-control migration. End of quote. So spoke Vice President J.D. Vance in Munich, and he attacked the loss of free speech, citing the case of Adam Smith-Connor, a 51-year-old physiotherapist and army veteran charged with, quotes again, the heinous crime of standing 50 metres from an abortion clinic and silently praying for 3 minutes. End of the quote. What do we make of this chastisement of Europe? Rejoining me now is my panel, opinions and features editor at City AM, Alice Denby, Mail Online journalist Lettis Bromowski, and former Labour advisor Matthew Lazar. Well, Alice, what did you make of it?
Well, Michael, you're going to be talking about Shakespeare later in this programme. I think this speech was best described as a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. I think the idea that free speech is more of a threat in Europe than Russia actively invading a European country is insane. I think he seems to be getting most of his ideas about Britain from X, the idea that this is some sort of dystopia with thought police and Muslim rape gangs crawling the street is a slur on Britain. I think this speech was insulting, and I don't think we should listen.
Well, what about his point, the quote that we saw up on the screen, that nobody voted to have hundreds of thousands of unvetted migrants? No one on this continent voted for that. Did he have a point there?
Yeah, I mean, look, like the fool in Lear, there's some truth in what he says, even though it's nonsense. He's right that nobody voted for mass immigration in Europe. There's plenty in his speech that, plenty that you can agree with. But it's very hypocritical coming from him to talk about free speech in a country which has banned the Associated Press from White House press briefings, to talk about democracy being under threat when his president, stoked a riot to storm the Capitol. I don't think he has a leg to stand on here.
Matthew, yes, indeed, you can level charges of hypocrisy, but what about the message? I mean, the message could be true even if delivered by a hypocrite.
Yes, it could be, but I don't think it is true. Actually, in terms of what he's talking about, undocumented migrants, Angela Merkel got re-elected after letting 1 million Syrian refugees come to the country. So it's simply not true. First of all, this was an absolute outrage. There was an election in Germany in a week's time. He delivered a speech in Germany which directly interfered with the internal politics of Germany. I remember all those people on the right who got themselves into a right hoo-ha because 24 sort of 25-year-old Labour staffers went and delivered a few leaflets in Pennsylvania, and here you've got the Vice President of the United States going to Germany, breaking what is a huge taboo in Germany about whether or not you deal with the far right in terms of the AfD. They weren't invited to the conference. There's a kind of cordon sanitaire around them. He was criticising that. These are not minor issues. He wasn't sort of saying he didn't like the colour of the carpet at the airport. He was, right in the heart of a domestic policy debate with a week to go to an election. Can you imagine if Keir Starmer or Olaf Scholz had gone to the United States 1 week before polling day and delivered a speech like that? Come on, this was, in a sense, if he wants to push Europe away, that's fine.
The Americans are more powerful than Keir Starmer, that's the point.
Absolutely they are, but they're not all powerful, Michael. This is the thing. They're living in a fantasy land, just like people like Boris Johnson lived in a fantasy land that Britain has more power than it has. They're living in a fantasy land that America is all-powerful and all-seeing. Germany is much more interested in selling machine tools to China than it is in many things that it does to the United States. And, of course, tariffs, economically, may push Europe the way. So if he wants to end the Atlantic Alliance, if they want to destroy what's kept peace for 75 years, they're going a really good way about it. And the people who will pay the price ultimately, they're voters in the United States.
Letters, was your response to this as hostile as your two panellists here?
Unfortunately, I am going to have to agree with them on most of the points that it was a hostile take. You could see that from the reaction in the room. A lot of people sat around sort of looking like goldfish with their mouth open, being like, you've come here, everyone expected you to talk about Ukraine, the real threat in Europe, and there you are, coming on our continent and basically being rude about everything that we're doing. I think that this highlighted a sort of a change in diplomacy and what I mentioned earlier about this generational shift. And now what we're going to be seeing is this much more muscular, sort of strong-armed US approach to dealing with.
But sorry, whose side were you on? Were you on the side of those European leaders who were gold fishing in the room and feeling offended? You were you?
I was a bit offended. Yeah, right. you come into onto the continent and you disregard the real issues, like Alice was saying, that there is an actual potential war.
You think migration is not a real issue?
I do think it's a real issue, but I think everyone understands that that's an issue. And I do think we're taking approaches to combat that, you know, whether that is through deportations or whether that is... I think more can be done, don't worry. I definitely think, and you'd be naive to think that immigration is not an issue in this country. It's a massive issue, and it's a massive issue for voters. But the issue at a security conference in Munich is Ukraine and Russia war. That's the issue that he should have spoken about. And yeah, I do think it was rude. But I do think this is the new sort of America that we're seeing. It's their way or the highway kind of thing. And it'll be very interesting to see how Keir Starmer deals with this, because a lot of our politics at the moment has been around, particularly since Trump has come in, been around sort of not quite jumping around the issues and not quite saying we disagree with you because we're so worried about tariffs and we're so worried about what the outcomes of what Trump's going to do. So it'll be interesting to see how he does this. I hope he comes out strong and I hope he defends British position on this.
Well, I must say my reaction to the speech was rather different from all you three. I mean, I started cheering when he started calling the European commissioners commissars, because I think he's absolutely onto a point there. I cheered when he reminded people how England, as he put it, and actually he was right in this case to say that England had voted for Brexit because Scotland did not. And I think there will be many people in Britain who thought this was exactly the message that needed to be delivered to the ruling class in Europe. I mean, the European commissars, the leaders of the European countries, they have promised their populations again and again they were going to deal with migration. They have done the opposite. Migration has gone up in all of these countries. Every day we're seeing terrorist incidents which are being interpreted as being part of this migration problem. I think a lot of people will have cheered, and the more they saw those people with their open mouths, the more they saw those people shocked by the rudeness, seeing that the diplomatic norms and rules were being broken, the happier they will have been. Discuss, Alice.
Well, I think what we should be cheering is you're right. If European leaders, if our own leaders do wake up and start taking these issues more seriously, you're absolutely right. People did vote for Brexit on the understanding that they would see overall migration numbers reduced. The exact opposite happened very deliberately. Boris Johnson opened the gates to many, many more legal migrants, and we are now seeing the effects of that. But these are our own problems. Right? People shouldn't be cheering a foreign official coming here and insulting us in this way. They should be encouraging their own leaders and voting for leaders who will deliver on the policies that they want, and controlling migration clearly is one of those issues.
Well, people may well vote for such people. They may well do so in Germany on Sunday. Matthew, it's unfair to think of you as being a representative of the Labour Party of the government or anything like that. But there will be viewers who will have seen your reaction just now, and they'll say, God, that's exactly the problem. After all this time, there's the fellow who represents Labour, still being completely complacent, being sort of high-minded about migration, because migration doesn't affect him, and only being upset that J.D. Vance was rude, rather than going to the matter, to the issue.
Absolutely not. No, look, I believe that migration... I mean, I think, as we've heard, one of the reasons that I was pro-remaining in the EU was I thought that actually allowed sensible freedom of movement, actually allowed sensible aid to our economy with people who went home. What did Boris do? As soon as we were out, he let 1 million people and their dependents in from around the world who aren't going to leave Britain. It isn't part of a kind kind of mobile labour scheme. So, no, I think the immigration is too high. I think legal migration is too high, but I'm not going to take any lectures of it from JD Vance.
Why
because
not?
Because, first of all, it's completely inappropriate, and secondly, in our earlier discussion, let's invoke the ghost not of Ronald Reagan. Can you imagine when Ronald Reagan said that he would rather be dead than red in that famous speech that built his reputation before he became president? Can you imagine? He's turning in his grave at what France and Trump are doing. And I think you're right. This is going to be the big battle in European politics now. Is you're going to define. It's not going to be people on the left who are going to define themselves. It's not sort of hardcore left. It's not Jeremy Corbyns of this world who are going to define themselves by an anti-Americanism. If America doesn't believe in freedom, it believes in whatever Donald Trump thinks that morning, then we're all going to have to stand up for what we believe, and that's a whole new ballgame. But it doesn't mean that. I think voters have the right to say what they like about migration, but they're voters in European countries. They're not JD Vance coming and lecturing us here.
Yeah, and
Margaret Thatcher lectured Ronald Reagan, and it did us all a great deal of good. Lettuce. You come from the Mail Online.
Yeah.
Speak up for Mail Online readers. Do you think Mail Online readers have taken the view that you three have taken on your comfortable sofa this morning, this afternoon?
Look, I'm not going to speak to our entire wonderful audience out there, but there will be a lot of people out there who are concerned about immigration. Like you were saying, it is a huge issue. It's a hugely controversial topic here. And in Europe, we've seen over the past few days in Germany the issues that have been going on with the terror incidents that have been going on, driving a Mini Cooper into a crowd. That's the second time that's happened in a matter of months there. And then in Austria, just yesterday, the stabbing that happened with a Syrian asylum seeker.
And aren't you journalists worried about freedom of speech?
I believe that there is, on the macro level, in the UK, freedom of speech is not under threat. There are incidences...
Are you looking forward to the new definition of Islamophobia?
Specifically, or personally, I'm not going to be celebrating that day or not celebrating that day. But I do think there are issues when situations are misconstrued and misread, and it shouldn't be, police shouldn't be turning up at your door depending on what you've written on Twitter. There are instances on a micro level that freedom of speech is under threat in those senses. On a macro level, we're a very free and tolerant country.
Thank you very much indeed to my panel, Alice Denby, Lettuce Bronowski and Matthew Lazo. Coming up, a controversial art auction comprised exclusively of work generated by artificial intelligence has sparked outrage. What does technological advance do to the role of the artist? I'll be joined by a leading auctioneer to discuss. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun. No, he didn't say that, Dave. I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Headliners. Tomorrow's papers tonight, every night from 11 p.m.
Yeah. We've got the Daily Mail now with the latest in the court case over whether a man is a woman or a man. It's a tough question. And J.K. Rowling has given her opinion. I think I can guess what it is, Cressida.
Explosive twist in Australia's What is a Woman trans battle as Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling gets involved. So this is the court case Giggle versus Tickle. Tickle was a...
He's Mr. Men.
That's right. It's a Mr. Men trans battle.
Kind of is a Mr. Man.
It was a women's group, wasn't it? Tickle, Giggles... Oh, I get it wrong. Giggles for girls. And Roxy Tickle, who is a trans woman, wanted to join this group and wasn't allowed, was banned for being a biological male, and then sued and amazingly got $10,000 for this, which is already extraordinary to me.
Yeah.
But it's now doubling down and is going to file a cross-appeal seeking to upgrade the judgment.
Yeah.
So Roxy has come back for another bite of the cherry.
And I've had a look at this Roxanne Tickle, the trans woman.
Is she pretty?
No, not one of the pretty ones. Not a Blair White. Just looks like, to be honest, it looks like
you could be sued for $10,000.
Looks like one of us.
Yeah.
To be honest, no. Like I mean, I'll happily.
For yourself.
No, I think it's an absolute. It's a farce, and it's making a mockery of not just. It's not just making a mockery of women's right to have their own spaces. It's making a mockery of genuine trans people who actually put some effort in and look like a woman.
What do you mean a genuine trans
And also,
people?
if
We don't believe in that.
If your name was Roxanne, if you were going to transition, you wouldn't pick the name Roxanne Tickle.
What?
You choose Tess.
You Tess. That's a kind of name. No, the truth is that's one of the problems, is you get a choice of the name you're going to choose. And of course, you're going to choose like a hot Roxanne. That's a hot Roxanne. That's a great name. They're not going to choose.
You don't think
Louis.
Tess would work better with Tickle?
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes. Thank you for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family. Simply go to gbnews.com/yoursay.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Last week, Christie's Auction House in New York announced that it was holding an auction devoted solely to art created with artificial intelligence. Nearly 6,000 people have signed an open letter calling on Christie's to cancel the sale over concerns that the technology behind such AI art pieces exploits human artists and can potentially violate their copyright. And there are broader ethical questions at play too. Where do the boundaries of art lie? How do we define the role of artist when machines come into the picture? With me now is James Thomas from Martin Stanmore Auctions. James, very good to see you indeed. I don't quite see how you can have art without a human being. I mean, art to me is something which is produced by a human being which expresses something about the human condition. To me, that cannot be produced by a machine. How do you react to that?
I agree completely with what you're saying there. I think for us at Martin Stanmore, we're very much about sort of getting behind artists in a traditional method. You know, art is all about that artistic journey and what kind of message they're trying to portray. So we very much support traditional art.
I perfectly understand that AI can generate things which are pleasing or provocative or interesting or challenging, whatever you're looking for from art. But it will be by definition derivative, will it not?
I think it will be. I think it will be difficult. I mean, you've probably seen recently in the news, Forbes done a piece on it, a 12-foot piece. Christie's have done it before. They've done experimental auctions before. I think they've done a portrait of Edmund de Bellamy, and it went for over $430,000. So,
wow.
Although they're going to probably fetch quite a numerous sum for this next auction, what it sort of sends as a message, I think, will be conflicting, as it is for many.
But what AI can understand about what art is can only be because AI has reviewed what art already is and derived some kind of image from the millions, possibly, of images that it surveyed. In other words, it has to be derivative. And that immediately raises the question about your copyright, my copyright, the artist's copyright.
Yeah, and I think after speaking with quite a few artists that we support and back at Martin Stanmore, it's definitely a concern for them, that kind of copyright concern. It's going to be a bit scary when AI can replicate a Picasso, for example, down to a T. An authenticity does come into it quite a lot.
It's not, of course, just scary for artists in the sense of people who paint or sculpt. It's also for anybody who's in a creative activity. I mean, for example, for what it's worth, all the words that I've ever uttered or recorded or written can be surveyed by AI, and I can be impersonated. By the way, I try this from time to time. When I'm making my television programmes, I sometimes say to my team, I've got a piece to camera to do now. Find out what AI would say that I would say. And, of course, what it comes up with. It doesn't have enough knowledge about what I've just experienced, so it's not a perfect example. But it certainly gets the tone. And, therefore, I mean, I'm completely replaceable. I mean, the next series that I do Well, thank you so much. But the next series I do of railway judges, you could perfectly well have an avatar and AI producing words that sound like mine.
It is very scary. It is very scary. And I think for collectors and investors, it's a bit scary for them too. I mean, a lot of our collectors at Martin Stanmore that we speak to, they very much prefer things that come from traditional artists, not just sort of blue chip works, but also up and coming artists. But yeah, it's very scary what's possible now. So we're trying to, from our point of view, really hold our clients' hands and guide them through the process of investing into art that we believe and know with all of our research that we do is going to stand the test of time and be a bit of a safe haven for them.
You talk about investing, and I mean, that's a very good verb, because a lot of people, I imagine, put money into art that they may like, but as important, or maybe more important, is that it's a good place to put their money. It's better than putting it in the bank or whatever, because they'll be able to get more money out when they come to sell it. What evidence do we have about the durability of AI-produced art? Do we think it's going to hold its value?
We personally wouldn't advise any of our investors to go into AI art. It's not something that we back or support in any way. Like I said, we do blue chip artwork, and we've got up-and-coming and emerging artists. We give them a platform for growth to help that investment see the growth that we want. We know from traditional art it's always stood the test of time. You know, world wars, recessions, COVID. We had a great year in COVID. You know,
Did you?
All of our clients did extremely well. Financial crisis in 2008, art did very well. When other businesses were shutting down, struggling, the stock market was, you know, up and down and very volatile. Art's always proven to be very safe for our investors.
I wonder whether there's a short term and a long term here. I mean, we're talking about the very fact that we're talking about this on television at the moment is because this is an innovation. It's something which has not happened or not happened very much before. Therefore, possibly, if you go to the first auction of AI art and you buy a piece and you can then tell your friends, and your certificate of authenticity says this as well, this was sold at one of the very first auctions of AI art, that makes it worth money in itself, and that might hold its value. But if this happens again and again and again and again, possibly it wouldn't be as valuable.
Yeah, I don't think there's going to be a lot of continuity in it. I think when you look at trends, there's always going to be people that invest and collect the next biggest trend. You know, Bitcoin, NFTs.
NFTs are they non-fungible tokens?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Explain that.
So it's
some of these things we're talking about are exactly that, aren't they? They're non-fungible tokens.
Yeah, and I think this is where again we encourage people to invest into and collect things that are going to be tangible, and I think that's the main thing here. And with this AI replicating anything it wants, whenever it wants, you know, who knows? There could be certificates of authentication that can be replicated and generated by AI to go with that. So I think there's always going to be a bit of a query there.
Yeah. People are scared by it. I mean, you're saying your clients are going to stick where they are. You've got a conservative view on this, but there wouldn't be 6,000 people signing a letter if they weren't scared.
And then they are worried, and it's not just about competition. I think that's just one aspect of this. It's more about taking away from all of the hard work that artists do and the sort of love and passion and desire to create meaningful art. You know, it's that's the other part of it where it's concerning and worrying, because you know the art market is a wonderful thing, whether you're a collector or an investor. It's a wonderful thing, and we worry that it's being tampered with.
Very good. Well, we'll see how the pieces do in New York. A lot of controversy around Christie's sale of AI-generated art. Thank you very much indeed, James Thomas. Coming up, is Ireland's economic golden age about to unravel with President Trump's second term? Journalist Michael Murphy will share his thoughts on the peril ahead for the Irish economy. This is Sunday with Michael Portillo, only on GB News.
Very good afternoon. It's almost 12:30, and here are your latest headlines from the GB newsroom. Now, the Prime Minister is to join European leaders at an emergency summit tomorrow as they consider how to respond to US President Donald Trump's push for an end to the war in Ukraine. Sir Keir Starmer is to visit Washington later in February in hopes it will bridge the gap between Europe and the US. This comes after the transatlantic relationship was strained by Mr. Trump's decision to speak to Vladimir Putin in the search for a Ukraine peace deal. Meanwhile, there are reports of the PM preparing to overrule Chancellor Rachel Reeves and raise British defence spending. Speaking last night, the Prime Minister said it was a once-in-a-generation moment for the UK, the US and Europe to work together, and that it's clear Europe must take on a greater role in NATO. This comes as the Munich Security Conference draws to a close later today after a weekend of discussing future security challenges. During the conference, Volodymyr Zelensky called for the creation of a European army after suggesting the continent could not rely on Donald Trump's United States for its defence.
Many leaders have talked about Europe that needs its own military, an army of Europe. And I really believe that time has come. The armed forces of Europe must be created.
Meanwhile, senior officials from Donald Trump's administration will start peace talks with Russian and Ukrainian negotiators in Saudi Arabia in the coming days. Now, Austrian police believe the suspect for the Villach stabbing was a suspected Islamist who was radicalised online. A 23-year-old Syrian asylum seeker has been arrested after stabbing passersby in the Austrian city yesterday. A 14-year-old boy has died and 4 others were left seriously injured, with 3 in intensive care. The 23-year-old suspect, who has not yet been named, is a Syrian national with legal residence in Austria, according to the police. Austria's right-leaning Freedom Party leader, Herbert Kickl, said in a statement, "We need a rigorous crackdown on asylum and cannot continue to import conditions like those in Villach." And Hollywood will descend onto London this afternoon for the 78th BAFTA Awards. There are 42 films up for awards this evening as the slightly unpredictable awards season kicks off, with the drama Conclave leading the way with 12 nominations. Shining a light onto the selection process of a new pope, the film's lead Ralph Fiennes is up for Best Actor. Spanish-language musical Emilia Perez is up there with 11 nominations, but its chance at success took a hit recently after offensive historic tweets from its stars resurfaced. The ceremony will be hosted by actor David Tennant at London's Royal Festival Hall. That's the news on GB News. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello, welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Today is going to be largely dry for most of us, often cloudy and still on the chilly side before turning milder by midweek. Having a look at the bigger picture then, we're still in this battleground, higher pressure out towards the east with this deep area of low pressure towards the west driving east and southeasterly winds. Across much of England and Wales today, it is going to be largely dry, cloudy, much drier than Saturday. Outbreaks of rain across Northern Ireland and breezy here too. Best of the sunshine across western Scotland, with eastern Scotland seeing some wintry showers. Otherwise, it is still on the chilly side, especially in the breeze, but highs in the southwest up to 8 or 9 degrees. So through Sunday evening then, we hold on to some wintry showers across eastern parts of Scotland, mainly falling as snow over the highest ground. Towards the west, we'll see some clear spells through this evening, but across Northern Ireland, turning damp with outbreaks of rain moving through. Across much of England and Wales, though, a largely dry end to the weekend with some clear spells developing into the night. So as we go Sunday night into Monday morning, this band of rain across Northern Ireland will continue to push its way north and eastwards into western parts of Scotland and the south, perhaps turning wintry over the hills. Otherwise, much of England and Wales staying dry with some clear spells, and under any clear spells, we could see just a touch of frost developing by Monday morning. So to start Monday morning, again, still a chilly start out there, a lot of cloud around. There will be some breaks in the cloud, especially across northern parts of Scotland, with a few showers across Orkney and Shetland. Some glimmers of sunshine coming into the southeast of England, with heavier spells of rain coming into Northern Ireland later in the day. Otherwise, temperatures ranging from 4 degrees in the east, but up to 8 in the far southwest. Bye-bye.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Is the sun about to set on Ireland's economic golden age? US multinationals have invested heavily in Ireland because of its competitive corporate tax regime. 1 in 8 euros of Irish tax revenue now comes from US companies. That's a 500% increase since 2010 and has had a markedly positive impact on Ireland's coffers. President Trump is not amused, thinking that US entrepreneurs should pay their taxes to Uncle Sam. With me now is Telegraph journalist Michael Murphy. Very good to see you. Welcome to GB News. So tell me more about this policy. I confess I've envied this in the past. I thought, well, you know, why doesn't Britain go out there and cut its corporate tax rates and attract these multinational companies? So far, so good for Ireland.
Yes, Ireland's had a very good deal with US multinational firms. It's, you know, just 10 US multinationals employ about 375,000 people in the country, primarily in tech and pharmaceuticals. 60% of its corporate tax receipts come from those 10 companies. And so it's probably the most exposed to any hostile moves from the Trump administration out of any country in Europe. So, you know, Ireland has been able to bankroll a number of quite extravagant projects on the back of this. For example, they're building what may become the most expensive hospital per patient in the world. I think it started out as a project in the millions or tens of millions. It's now ballooned to 2 billion euros.
Oh my goodness!
You know, they spaffed £300,000 on a bike shed, which doesn't even shelter the bikes from the rain. If this isn't sort of a late-stage Bourbon decadence, I don't know what is. And I think they're going to find that the tide is going to come in rather fast with the new dispensation in Washington.
Now, on top of that, there's been a fair amount of what I might call gesture politics, virtue signalling, insults against the man who's now, again, President Trump. And, of course, a very hostile attitude to Israel, which won't play well with the Trump administration either.
Indeed, yes, Michael. A bit like our own government, they've been unable to hold their tongues with regard to Donald Trump. Michael Martin suggested his immigration policy was racist during his first term. You know, Simon Harris, who is the foreign minister and will be leading up the trade delegation, trying to charm and you know, cajole the Trump administration in the coming weeks. He called Trump an awful gal, which is a sort of Irish word for an idiot. This is not the sort of best foot that they could have put forward. And I don't think the diplomatic corps in Washington has been any better. You know, from what I hear, they've been ignoring Trump people for the last 4 years. They've got this sort of prissy, puritanical view that they only want to associate with Democrats and that the Trump people are beyond the pale. You know, a Fine Gael party member, which is Ireland's sort of centre-right party, was over in Washington a few years ago and had the temerity to go to a right-wing conference, and he was absolutely pilloried for it in the media and by the party. So they've really burnt a lot of bridges that they could have been, you know, cultivating relationships over the past few years.
And touch upon the Irish policy towards Israel. Because, I mean, obviously that has been, I suppose, developed for domestic consumption, but it does have consequences with the new US administration.
Yes, so the Irish government has something of an obsession with Israel, I would say. You know, they regular interventions into the conflict that is thousands of miles away, in which Ireland has no stake and no influence to speak of. But, you know, it doesn't stop Simon Harris, the foreign minister, from pontificating about it with you know, alarming frequency. And the Trump administration is probably the most pro-Israel administration that we've seen in recent times. Howard Lutnick, who is his commerce secretary, who Mr. Harris will be sitting across from in negotiations, is a staunch supporter of Israel. He actually rode in behind Donald Trump as a result of his crystal clear moral clarity on October 7th. I hear that there's no love lost between Mr. Lutnick and the Irish government. And so the question for Ireland's leaders now will be, you know, can they walk the walk of, you know, are they going to pay a price for their moral posturing on Israel? Are they willing to suffer economic damage for their principles?
What is the price that might be paid? Have the Americans said anything yet about how they want to put this situation right as they see it?
Donald Trump said this week that he is very keen on reshoring pharmaceutical companies. Now, you know, as I said, just 10 mostly pharmaceutical and tech companies contribute 60% of Ireland's tax receipts. Now, they employ 375,000 people. If Trump is serious about reshoring, and I would suggest that Ireland should take him very seriously, that would devastate the Irish economy. That would be it would be a shock unlike any other country in Europe would experience.
How does he go about reshoring them? Does he take sanctions against those companies? Does he take sanctions against Ireland? There was an international move, wasn't there, to try to force all countries to have a minimum rate of corporation tax. I think Joe Biden was very keen on this. They wouldn't go that route, though, would they? Because they're not particularly interested in international action. How will they get these companies to reshore away from Ireland to the United States?
Well, essentially, the reason why these companies are in Ireland is not because Ireland has any, you know, great sort of mines or generative capacity capabilities. It's because they're doing funny accounting. You know, a classic example is a pharmaceutical company will buy an Irish subsidiary. It will manufacture, say, a pill or a vaccine for 50 cents. It will then sell it on to the Irish subsidiary for a markup of 10 euros. And then it will sell it in Europe and in America, and all of the profits get sucked into, all of the tax on the profits gets sucked into Ireland. And so Ireland is essentially leaving everybody's coffers shortchanged. And so all Trump would have to do would be to close some of those loopholes. And then all of the incentives for these companies, or a lot of the incentives for these companies, would disappear. And so I think he's got the lowest hanging fruit of those, you know, creative accounting and tax loopholes that he could close with the stroke of his Sharpie.
It is a little bit like a morality tale, isn't it, the whole thing?
It is, yeah. I think, you know, if Ireland is... if Ireland pays an economic price, they might realise that, you know, some of these virtue signalling gestures have been very ill-advised.
And quite expensive. Thank you very much indeed, Michael Murphy. Coming up, How Do I Love Thee? Let me count the ways. Elizabeth Barrett Browning's sonnet is a firm favourite at weddings, and yet 8 out of 10 members of the Gen Z generation reportedly think that such verse is outdated and irrelevant. Having marked St. Valentine's Day, can we bring romantic poetry back into public consciousness? First, if you're in search of some winter sun, here's the forecast for some of the top European holiday destinations.
Be nice to escape the grey.
Clear skies, here we come.
As clear as our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Hello there. We've got rain for Madeira over the next 24 hours, some stronger winds too, but much of the central Med will be dry with some sunny spells. We can see for Monday outbreaks of rain, strong winds, 17 Celsius Madeira. The Canary Islands generally dry, and much of western and central parts of the Mediterranean seeing some spells of sunshine. Unsettled further east towards Greece and across to Cyprus. Thunderstorms, outbreaks of showery rain. The outlook though is for plenty of sunny spells, temperatures in the high teens to low 20s.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
As we kick off 2025, many of us might be thinking about a bit of a wardrobe refresh, especially if you're over 50 and you feel like the high street doesn't quite cater to you.
Indeed. That's where our next guest, Mel Tillett, comes in. She's in the studio with us now.
Mel, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. That you are this accidental influencer. I love that you said that's the first time. Yeah, it is. That's the first time I've heard it. You can have that for free on TV.
Thank you so much. It's quite true.
Tell us about your following. Obviously, an influencer that many people might typically think of would be someone in their teens, someone in their 20s, someone who's particularly social media savvy, using TikTok. Talk to us about your brand of influencer.
Well, our influencer, my kind of influence is over the older age group, the over 50s. For my business, I do a lot of live videos. I'll do them early in the morning at 7:30, which sounds ridiculous, but I know my ladies are up and about at that time having a cup of coffee or whatever that might be. And just being honest about day-to-day life. So my dogs are running about, my grandchildren are even sometimes in them, one thing and another. So it's just been purely by accident that I've got this really nice, loyal following, and I get lovely messages off ladies. I'll do things like, I'll tell them when I'm going for a mammogram, and I'll say, come on, everybody go for your mammogram.
That's brilliant.
All sort of health conscious things. I've been a lot heavier than I am now, and I've slimmed down and lost some weight. I've been talking about that journey as well. And then ladies will ask me questions on the videos, and we chat about all sorts of different things. And now I'm getting messages every day, and people are loving the clothing ranges that we do. And it's just, I started off as a business, that's purely what I did, but it's turned out into this other, I get recognised places I go now, which is really weird.
It must be a huge benefit to your business as well.
We employ around about 50 people.
Wow.
And I'm quite open to my audience and saying, you know, while you're keep buying offers, while you're loving our products and our clothing, you're keeping 50 people in jobs.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, you didn't say that, though.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Sunday with Michael Portillo. Shall I compare thee to a summer's day? Asks William Shakespeare in his most famous sonnet. However, in a blow to those who revere the humble 14-line love poem, a new study has found that almost 8 in 10 of Gen Z Brits believe that the romantic poems of Shakespeare, Keats, Barrett Browning and the rest are outdated and irrelevant. Can we re-engage youngsters with such verse? Can the Gen Z audience become infatuated with love poetry? Joining me now is the Professor and Chair of English at the University of Virginia, Andrew Stauffer. Andrew, welcome to GB News. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Michael. Thank you for having me.
Now, how do you react? How do you react to this poll? It must be rather disappointing to you. But more to the point, how do we pull this back? How do we get this generation interested again in love poetry?
It's a good question. There's a lot to be said. I mean, partly the two you quoted are the most sort of famous, popular ones, the top hits from Shakespeare and Barrett Browning. And it may be that we need to encourage people to go for some deeper cuts. I think some of the sonnets in Shakespeare's sequence, some of the sonnets from the Portuguese, in a certain way, are maybe more compelling and to a modern audience. And so it's possibly just encouraging people to spend more time going beyond the obvious. I think with both poetry and love, the path of least resistance is to be wary of that. And so spending a little more time paying attention to some of these great works from the past, I think really would pay dividends. I'm trying to do that in my classes all the time with my own students.
I wonder whether there are degrees here. I mean, there are some differences. I mean, I personally very rarely turn to Byron, I confess, or Keats. But Shakespeare, Shakespeare I would, Donne I would. Is there more resistance to certain poets and certain authors than others?
Well, it's sort of the older it gets, sometimes the more outdated it might feel just in terms of the language for modern readers. So Shakespeare, Surrey, Spencer, Wyatt, Donne can sometimes feel like the language isn't even the common idiom that people speak now, as opposed to Keats or Byron, or, you know, go forward into the 20th century, Auden, or, you know, sounds pretty much like we speak now. So there is a historical gap, and as the years go by, the older stuff sometimes feels older. Shakespeare's a special case because he's so prominent in culture at all times, but I think it is a challenge to read past what feels like outdated language to see the real feeling and the ideas that are there.
What is it that a poet does with language and in love, with language and with love, to express love better than any other way in which it can be expressed?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it is, you know, it's relying on language as being the primary way that we get in touch with our feelings, that, you know, poetry is the language art par excellence. And so it's the assumption that the more we can use our words to talk about our feelings, the deeper, more pleasurable, more available those feelings actually are to us. And so in a certain way, reading poetry, not only we recognize our feelings, we even catch feelings from art, from poems, from songs, from stories. There's a way that even our own most personal relationships are structured by the culture that we have grown up in and that we've been immersed in. And so it really can be an aid, or at least a transformative experience to encounter language, to give yourself words for your own very private feelings that turns out have been felt by other people going all the way back to Sappho and Catullus and Horace and through Shakespeare and through the whole English tradition. So that can be galvanizing as well, really kind of eye-opening to know that you're not alone in your feelings.
Yeah, that's very well put. Do you have favorite love verses yourself?
Well, you know, I hate to play favorites, of course, but and partly it does depend on where you are in your own romantic life. I'm on the wrong side of 50, so I have different favorite poems now than I did when I was in my 20s. And it depends on where you are in a relationship. If you are in the wooing phase, or the expectant phase, the phase of many possibilities, or the phase of pure celebration where you're in the midst of a new love affair, or you've just ended one, or someone has died, and then now you're in a different kind of love poem. The love is still there, but the kinds of feelings that you're expressing are very different. I do sometimes turn to the romantics, to the British romantics. That's my area of specialty. So Keats was an early love, and Byron and Shelley, all young men who died young. I'm much older than any of them now. And so my appreciation and enthusiasm maybe has mellowed or changed as I've grown older. But there's just so many wonderful poems out there. I could read a whole bunch of them to you, but I don't want to take up too much time.
Yeah, we don't have time for that. But I wonder, Andrew, whether there's a line or two that's just drifting into mind just now.
Oh, gosh. Why don't I read just a little bit of Byron? I love this, just 4 lines from a poem about a young man he was in love with at Cambridge, John Eddleston. And what's beautiful about it is the kind of conspiratorial nature of love that it evokes. He and Eddleston could not really confess their feelings for each other, but they could flirt secretly in front of an oblivious crowd. And I love these few lines. Ours too the glance none saw beside, the smile no one else might understand, the whispered thoughts of hearts allied, the pressure of the thrilling hand. And you sort of feel like you catch Byron and Eddleston in these moments. They're captured in verse when no one else knew what was going on, touching each other's hands, sharing a secret glance. And that seems common across time. And so it's those moments where you feel like the past has fallen away and you're living in the same moment as the other people.
Thank you very much, Andrew. It's interesting because some young people think that poems are only about heterosexuality. They are not. That's one of the reasons that they object. Anyway, thank you to all of my guests for joining me today. Where there is the fog of war, I trust that we brought clarity. Where there is conflict, I hope we brought some peace of mind. I'll be here the same time next week. Coming up now on GB News, The Weekend with Dawn Neeson. Bye-bye.
front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. Through today is often cloudy, still on the chilly side, but turning much milder as we head into next week. So having a look at the bigger picture, we're still in this battleground between higher pressure out towards the east, low pressure towards the west, driving these southeasterly winds. So through the rest of Sunday evening then, England and Wales are staying largely dry with some clear spells developing. Across northern